Do you think that we've kind of reached peak wokeness and we're on the other side of that?
I think the peak wokeness of like when the things were the wokest has already passed. There, because
Hmm.
it does seem like not just the Republicans are pushing back. It does seem like a lot of people are just getting tired of dealing with wokeness, which, to me, that's a great thing.
One thing I'm curious about is whether you think we've reached peak wokeness, because I actually reject the idea that at this point, this is the anti-woke stuff is even working out that well for the right. I mean,
DeSantis was
DeSantis
floundering, and that was his
did
whole thing. He
right.
just changed his strategy to put woke on as his fourth biggest issue. It used to be number one. Go ahead.
He says it in like every friggin' sentence. He clearly has decided like this is the thing. And I think part of the reason that you're saying, which is that, he's trying to stitch together this coalition of people who don't like Trump with people who used to like Trump and people who are
Right.
moderate and people are hard right and whatever. And so he's like, wokeness, that's the place where maybe we can meet. It's obviously not even working out with the Republican base. There's also some signs like bunch of these corporations are firing now their chief diversity officer because they figured out that, these trainings actually actively make people more racist in the workplace and are not working out. And the whole thing is just a damn grift. So you've got that. You also have on the electoral side, it just doesn't seem to have the juice that the Republican Party seemed to think that it was going to. I mean, 2022, there was a lot of money that was spent on like anti-trans, anti-CRT, et cetera. It obviously didn't work out for them. And then, as I was saying with the Ron DeSantis stuff. So do you think that we've kind of reached peak wokeness and we're on the other side of that?
Well, I think we definitely reached, I think the peak wokeness of like when the things were the wokest has already passed. There, because
Hmm.
it does seem like not just the Republicans are pushing back. It does seem like a lot of people are just getting tired of dealing with wokeness, which, to me, that's a great thing. So yeah, we could be reaching that point already. So going forward, it might be less and less advantageous for Republicans to use these issues.
Hmm.
But with
Right.
DeSantis, I'm skeptical that him having problems nationally has anything to do with the wokeness. I think it's funny. I said this from like day one. I said, DeSantis has the charisma of wet cardboard. I just don't perceive him like being able to go on a national stage and really get energy, especially when, he's going up against Trump, which, if you love or hate Trump, you have to acknowledge that he's very charismatic. He has a lot of
Hmm.
energy, behind him. And I
Yeah,
can't see a
absolutely.
world in which how DeSantis can stand up to Trump in that arena.
So let me jump in here because there's a bunch of interesting things I want to respond to. So I think there's some level of like default anti-wokeness that every reasonable person sort of has, right? So to give a couple examples of this is they had polled the term Latinx to see if people are like it, don't like it, use it, don't use it, whatever. It was like under 10%. I don't remember the exact number, 9%, 6%, 3%. It was something like that.
Mhm.
Nobody's buying the Latinx stuff. So that's like a default, like when people are like, just don't change our language colossally overnight and pretend like it's some like crusade for morality, because it's not. Stop it. There's also what was the other example I wanted to give? Defund the police. Defund the police polls at like 18% or something like that. Because I think the default perspective for most Americans is like, well, of course we need police. So if you say defund the police, regardless of what point you think you might be making, it sounds like I want to abolish the police and have no police. And people just aren't on board with that. So I think there's like a default anti-wokeness. But I think the problem with DeSantis and many on the right who are on this like anti-woke crusade is that they've started overreaching colossally to the point where they are using the legislation that I talked about before, which is actually authoritarian, which mirrors the tactics of many on the woke side. So, what was the example? Ron DeSantis is currently waging a lawsuit against Bud
He's
Light
thinking of
over
suing.
the ad with Dylan Mulvaney.
Yeah.
So you have a trans person in an ad and you want to wage a lawsuit over this? Like, that strikes me as those shrieking social justice warriors online with the blue hair and the septum ring in 2012 who were telling you, don't do this, you can't do that, stop doing this. It's like Ron DeSantis has become that person, but on the right. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I thought like with the whole "Don't Say Gay" bill, which was the parental rights education, part of that bill I agreed with, which was that if a school is going to transition or socially transition, I should say, a child, that they should definitely have to notify the parents. And that's wild that wouldn't be the case. And the reason they passed that in Florida was because there was a school that was doing this without notifying the parents, and the child attempted to commit suicide. And so, like, I agree. Like, what happens is like this, like they do something that seems reasonable, but then they always take it too far because then they add the element of like, well, you can't talk about gayness existing essentially until 9th grade or whatever the frame point is. So that seems to be the case in all politics. It's like, oh, you agree like with some piece of legislation, but then someone always takes it too far. But but just to go back a second for the peak wokeness, even though I think we have sort of gone past peak wokeness, I mean, it's still happening. It's still an issue. Like it was only a few months ago, I think that it was Uber, I believe, fired or suspended their DEI chief, not because they're like, oh, you're too woke. They fired the DEI chief, who I believe was Asian, because she was trying to push back against people being racist against white people at Uber. And this was this year, only a few months ago. So these issues are still cropping up. And I think to Adam's point, what he said earlier is that even if this legislation is, more, quote, authoritarian because it's a law as opposed to someone being fired from their job or the cultural pressure, it's still the left version of it still is like in everyone's face or in a lot of people's face at all times.
Yeah.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.